Hi, those that don't know me. I'm buffbotman, one of the lead developers for Duskhaven. When you first land on Azeroth on Duskhaven 2.0 launch, the monks are planning a Scarlet Rebellion. There's a bunch of shenanigans going on with trogs and gnolls, and the centaurs are attacking. Check out, like, all of the zones will have very much an increased threat presence. This is a world in absolute chaos. It's not the quasi-peaceful world that we left behind, where all the threats were apocalyptic in nature. Some of the threats are just that. They're natural. They are faction-based. For instance, Hogger. Like, what if Hogger wasn't just a meme NPC? What if he had some juice? So instead of making up new MacGuffin factions, like, if I want to talk about magic, I don't need to do all this other stuff. I have Karazhan sitting over there. If I need to talk about death and undeath, I don't need the Shadowlands. I have the Plaguelands to tell me that story, right? Awesome. We're taking some of these huge overarching stories that WoW's done, but we're rooting them back. You know, the Fel are going to be dealing with Dire Maul, right? Because Prince Torteldrin and all of them in Dire Maul have become Fel infused, either by their want or by their corruption. But yes, the player characters are important, and the storyline will make that clear, as probably right around the tier 3 mark is when you'll start to see why. Because basically you're thrown into a world in chaos. We had a good hard look at how people enjoy the game, whether it's PvP, PvE, crafting, dungeons, what have you. And we don't want to force people to have to do things they don't want to do. Just as a general rule, we want to make things easier for people to play the game how they want to play, rather than how they have to play to be optimal at what they want to play. Yeah, so normal and heroic is going to be flexible. Mythic is currently set at 20. We're debating between 20 and 25, but 20 kind of where we're at. We are staggering raid release by difficulty. Normal's going to come out, and a week later heroic's going to come out. Then either 1 to 2 weeks after that, Mythic will come out. The reason we're doing that is to mainly collect data, let you have time to gear. Also, the raid will not launch for 1 week until the launch, or like the server launches. So you'll have a full week to get ready for raid. So don't freak out thinking it's a blitz to get to 60. Enjoy the server. Those are some decisions we made. The staggered raid release will continue in future raids as well.
Also, PTR win? No.
I mean, we hear PTR win every day. That's a Kebful level question, because pretty much what we're going to be testing is already in Kebful's hands. I can tell you the make sure it doesn't catch on fire the moment you log into it QA realm is online, but we're waiting for a last couple things on the UI side with the talent trees and all that, because we had to build out a fully new custom UI for all that. So we're still waiting on a few bugs to get worked out. There was one pretty nasty bug where you could like have infinite negative talent points. So we wanted to fix that and a few other things that just need to be done before QA and PTR. But it is up. It's just waiting for, we even have account creation for devs to go in and create dev accounts, but not quite ready to have QA on it just yet. But it is, you know, as soon as we get those last couple things ironed out. So we did 14 custom classes, and right now I believe there's 42 or 43 specs. They all have their own unique spells. Very, very few spells were actually like just copy pasted over. You know, obviously Mage has Fireball, Frostbolt, you know, but a lot of the abilities are completely new or they're modernized. Also, fun factoid, for people that don't know, if you don't keep up with Duskhaven, we're doing Mastery, and all the loot is brand new. We're doing full item generation. So you're not going to be looking at, oh, here's this cool custom raid that drops Molten Core loot. Nope. It's going to be fully custom loot. And I can tell you the first legendary is the Trash Bringer. So decide on your loot rolls on that. And there is a corrupted version for those DK enjoyers. But
thank you, Buff.
Damn it, you're going to make me play a rep alley.
Gordon Ramsay has requested to speak. Let's get him on stage. Welcome, Gordon. What you got, man?
All right, what's up, guys? I just have one question. What classes will the Ashbringer be locked to, if any at all?
So I will tell you the Ashbringer is a strength melee weapon. Same with the Corrupted, but there is no class lock other than obviously strength is
Gotcha.
required. But
Get
you know,
fucked,
if you're
hunters.
yeah. Don't worry though. We already have the second and third raid legendaries planned out, so you're going to get a lot of fun.
That's
Agi
huge.
users and casters are going to love the second raid, and then the third raid is going to have tanks and healers and hunters. Hunters are getting in the third raid as well.
That long.
You guys are gonna
Um,
make me re-roll to a ret paladin.
Yeah, make me suffer. I just saw your question. The drop is going to happen, and then you're going to have a relatively short quest line. It's like 4 to 5 quests. So Thunder Fury is actually not in. We're reworking it, but Thunder Fury specifically is a pain point. We're redoing the tank item that takes its place. And we are doing, Radicus, to answer your question, we are doing, out of the 12 raids planned for Duskhaven 2.0, 8 of them are brand new, and the other 4 are the original 4 raids that you would come to expect, but completely redone. 8 fully custom raids. And legendaries are going to be a little more common.
Are legendaries going to be difficulty locked?
Yes and no. So it's going to be very similar to if you've seen retail and how they handle their legendaries. Higher difficulty, higher chance to get it. But what we're gunning for is for the item to be somewhere between like heroic plus and mythic, but have that proc or that effect that takes it above. So we don't want it to be your bis forever. When the second tier comes out, the Ashbringer will no longer be your bis weapon, even though it's the Ashbringer. The other thing is it's not going to be the crazy rare, like getting Thunder Fury required 87 Molten Core runs. That's not what we're shooting for here. A legendary is basically just a slightly better weapon than you could normally get that has roleplay relevance, which is what legendaries were intended to be. It's kind of one of those things we don't want it to be, because if we set it to where it's something where you get it and then you never change it, then it has to be extremely hard to get.
Mhm.
And we balanced extremely hard to get versus iconic things that we want players to have their hands on. And we decided we can't have both. And so we went with that option. Now, granted, it's still going to be very good. Keep in mind, like, let's say you get the Ashbringer in tier 1. In tier 2, a mythic weapon, it could be roughly the same, right? Even though it's a tier higher, but it may not be better just on its face. Like Thunder Fury was better than any other weapon you could get until basically the end of Naxxramas, right? There was like one weapon that beat it for some tanks and not others. But that was mostly by the proc on it, right? And keep in mind that with our 4 tiers of gearing, we're going to be really pushing the power level up. Doing some simming. We're estimating that DPS will be anywhere from 3K starting out to around 25K at the end. That's where our line's kind of drawn, which is pretty wild. And it would be, I think, disappointing if you get an item and then you never get another item. I do get both sides of the argument, but in the effort of making it easier to get, we had to make it not permanently the best in slot item. We have discussed a system to upgrade legendaries with further quest lines and things of that nature to make you work for keeping it. Make Me Suffer M+ will scale between just below normal at M0 all the way up to just below mythic at M10. Of course, you'll be able to go past +10. And it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's not the 2, 4, 6, 8 thing. You'll be able to go past 10, but your rewards will be capped at 10. What we plan on doing is having the mythic tier or the mythic plus levels launch in line with the raid tier that they're meant to be with. So, like, mythic 0 will be available from launch. 1 to 3, that goes up to the normal raid gear, will come out with the normal raid. 4 through 7 that is up to the heroic tier will come out with heroic, and then 8+ will come out with mythic, because we don't want people to have to do mythic plus to gear up for the mythic raid, right? Like, that's just a feel bad moment. We don't want to invalidate heroic week by, well, just go grind M+, silly. And we're working on having a leaderboard and that sort of thing for people that really want to just flex how big their M+P is. But
yes.
as a side note, we are going to have a fully detailed dungeon journal for every piece of content we release. So
That's huge.
you're not going to just walk in and be like, oh, what does this do? And then he casts, fireball. And you're like, oh, that's nothing. And then the tank gets one shot. Like, that's annoying. That's wasting your all's time. That's not respecting the time you all put behind the keyboard. So any content we release will have a dungeon journal. We do have a guy that's versed in add-ons. At this time, though, we're mostly focusing on like the loot-based ones and the like acquisition type, so like Atlas loot and things of that nature. We're not planning a DBM at this time, but it could come.
Will there be markers able to like put around the map just normally within the UI, or do we have to get a separate add-on for that?
So we don't have any currently, but it's something that's relatively easy to do because it's just a spell that makes a visual effect. So if that's something that the player base requests, then we'll likely make them the 6 or 7. So stay tuned. Pretty much everything that anybody's ever asked for except seal twisting is in the game. Seal twisting is the one like hard
God.
no. So Websy, crafting recipes might come from the raid. It may not be the first one though. So we're looking at crafting to kind of keep up with raiding, but not outpace it, right? So that's kind of where we're at. It'll probably be like normal raid tier type stuff will be craftable. But yeah, at this time, there's no the runic orbs or what have you that is planned. Like in Wrath, where there was new crafting mats each time. And jewel crafting is getting redone, so plan on having a jewel crafter. We do have gems planned for jewel crafting, so there will be socketed items, even though we're in Classic. And we're going to be doing something with the description, but that's still yet to be announced, so keep that one in the pocket.
I think the thing that we agreed on in scripting at the bare minimum was head and shoulder enchants, and we wanted to add at least 2 or 3 more things that they did than just fucking scrolls.
Right. So instead of farming a rep, you'll get a crafted item. There's a few other things, like obviously Darkman cards are a huge thing that people love. And there is a larger profession rework in the works, but it's just something we're not going to have for launch. So we're actually planning on that for the tier 2 launch is kind of the ETA on that.
How many M+ dungeons will you have just at the start? And will they rotate between seasons if seasons are planned? ?
Perfect question. So right now we are taking a very ambitious look at our M+ system. We have 12 dungeons planned for M+ in season 1. They will rotate per raid launch and per tier launch. The mechanics of that won't go into a huge amount of detail, but they will rotate. There are going to be 4 that are constant that will always be there and will always be scaled up to the next season. Season 1 will launch with raids, yes.
Next question. From Suffer again. Did you make fully custom affixes, or did you take them from retail?
Mix of both. We have some custom affixes, some are from retail. Obviously, some of the really basic ones like Fortified and Tyrannical are going to be carried over. Some of the ones that people just absolutely hate, we scrapped and we made our own. And we'll be more than open to adjusting affixes post-launch. So it's something that if a mechanic is just awful, like points at Duskhaven 1.0's +8 mechanic, we're just going to get rid of it and we'll put something new in.
Can you talk about any of the custom affixes or just like the spitballing of it all? If not, it's okay.
So what we plan on doing, as far as details, not necessarily, but I can tell you that we're planning to have buckets. So the first bucket is obviously numbers go up. That's your Tyrannical and Fortified. The second bucket is going to be stuff on ground. So like, not to say this is in, but things like volcanic, stuff that is on the ground that you have to just not stand in stupid.
Yeah, like
the final bucket. The final bucket is going to be things that are you have to do the thing. So things like explosive was where you have to kill the mob or it detonates and kills everyone, or interrupts that have to be hit, or stop casts, things like that.
Assault has a question here. Druid forms gained through challenge content. Is this going to be the case for all forms? And will all forms from retail be available over time?
we're planning on, we have everything that is in 10.2.0 downported. So everything art-wise from anything in WoW's history is on the table. We are limiting it at first because it is a lot of work, but we have every single transmog, mount, form, spell effect, all of that stuff we have. I can't say where we're going to put cosmetics. I know a lot of them are going to come from challenge forms. I will spoil one in particular. I can tell you, if you like Flame Kitty, that is going to appear in the second raid as part of the acquisition method. So when the second raid comes out, Fire Kitty will be in that mix. And Astral Boomkin, I believe, is also in that mix. But it's going to come from a variety of sources. We haven't decided not to put any on the shop, but we also haven't decided to put any on the shop. So we haven't ruled it out, but at this point, none are planned to be.
And question from Chromie, will there be a shop? Yeah, Chromie, there will be a shop, cosmetics and stuff like that, as well as far as I know, various quality of life things.
Yes, so quality of life items, convenience items, loot bot, so automatic looting, and we have AoE looting already implemented. That's for free. You click one mob, the 15 mobs you killed, all their loot goes in your bag. But the auto looting, where you don't have to even click one button to get all your loot, yeah, we're going to charge you a few dollars to be that lazy. That's just the way it's going to be. Okay. Yes, race changes and faction changes will come as well. Bosch, you asked, would there be race changes available to swap races that aren't on launch? Yes.
Awesome. Question from Gordon Ramsay. How is the questing feature coming along? I think it was mentioned as a possibility some weeks ago, as we can't get Questy in 3.345, and Zygor is horrible.
As far as an add-on goes that is on the level of Questy, that's probably not going to be something we can do, because that requires a lot of work. We're talking, I think we added like on the magnitude of hundreds of quests. At the time, no, but I'm sure the community will do something ridiculous.
So I am actually working with Michael Crilly, a DevOps guy who is very interested in Azeroth Core. He's working on a system where people can go ahead and create basically all the essentials of a quest in JSON, and then a tool that will then translate that into SQL, which will allow us to go ahead and add quests at a lightning pace, or even have ChatGPT generate quests on the fly that release weekly and rotate. So there's a lot of really cool shit that, like in terms of automating quests that we're looking at. And if we can do that, that means we can do the process in reverse, which then gets all of the quest details for our custom quests in JSON, which we could then use to modify Questy. Yeah.
Right.
Like in an actual systematic way. But if we have to manually fucking do Questy, there's no way in hell we're going to do that. So that's why I'm focused on automation systems. We're editing the database manually and doing a whole bunch of shit that is just like really hard for no reason, purely because the tools for this shit just hasn't been developed yet. So if you're thinking about donating to the server, just know that your money is pretty much going to just funnel right into developers that make tools so that we can actually make cool shit in less than a year.
Make Me Supper asked, will tier sets be the full 8 pieces? Ooh. Or 9 pieces like tier 3? Or 5 pieces like retail?
So currently, our plan with tier sets is to stick to a 5 set with a 2 and 4 bonus on a 5 set piece. Will that change in the future? Potentially, but for the first raid tier, it is going to be 5 set pieces with a 2 and a 4 set bonus,
which allows us to make the bonuses actually meaningful, rather than having to give you a bunch of small bonuses and then something worthwhile at the end.
In the acquisition method, right? So there will be, I don't know if anybody plays retail here, but to give you an idea, I have my 4 set in retail right now because I raid. I'm a degenerate. I play every version of WoW you can possibly give me. I will play it. And I've gotten 0 tier tokens from the raid. I've acquired all 4 pieces of tier without a single drop from the raid. Now, that doesn't mean that that's the only way to go about it, or that's the way we are going about it, but we don't want it to be guilds falling apart because, oh, Jimmy got his 4 set and it would have been more on me. Like,
it's pixels.
It's pixels. And we want to, and also, while the raids will be numerically tuned, your brain functioning will be a lot more important. There's a lot more personal responsibility type mechanics, a lot more, focusing the right targets, a lot of that stuff. And then the numbers are just kind of the icing on the cake for that. So I can tell you that the final boss, you could probably kill it anywhere from 7 minutes to 12 minutes. Your DPS doesn't matter as much as doing the boss properly.
It's nice to have the 5 set because you can actually mix and match other pieces of gear instead of having to follow the cookie cutter. So I appreciate that. Websy's asking, and this is a controversial one, I'm sure. Will you be adding Titan Forging parentheses or something akin to it? It's like customization of the gear you get and adding the affixes.
At this time, no. We're not going to do any RNG on loot. If a piece of loot drops in the raid, it drops in the raid. That's not to say that there won't be systems to augment those items once they drop for you, but we aren't doing Titan Forging, War Forging, all that RNG loot pinata bullshit. No.
Yeah.
We're not going to make it so
right.
that you get a piece of gear and you're like, oh, it didn't roll RNG, so it's useless to me.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so no RNG.
Like a for instance of a system that could come about. It's something we've discussed. It is by no means even started to be implemented, but something that could come later is, hey, we did the last boss on normal and he dropped my best trinket, but I don't want to take it because we're doing heroic next. So I'll just pass on it. Well, what if there was an item that you clear, let's say 10 bosses on heroic, and you can buy an item that upgrades the normal version to heroic, right? So it takes you a clear and a half to upgrade one item, but it means that those impactful drops from lower difficulties may still be valuable on some level. That's something that we've discussed in passing. Those sorts of systems we're open to. Titan Forging, War Forging, all that shit, no. And it will never happen. Now, do keep in mind that with our stat system, we do have primary, which is like int, agi, stam, strength, those stats. Secondary, which is haste, crit, and mastery. And then we also are going to be bringing tertiary stats. There's quite a few of those, and it's not the ones you find on retail. A couple of them are, obviously, because they're just good. But there are some other tertiary stats that will be coming. So those may get added, but again, they won't be randomized. They'll be deterministic.
Kami has a question. Are we going to have to chase items? I think what he means by that is, are there items with a much lower drop rate that are highly sought after, but the RNG kind of gets to you? The people just want to see and want to get it. Excluding legendaries, of course, because
outside of legendaries, no. Loot's loot. Because part of the problem is let's say we did make the BIS item harder to get. Everyone wants it, so it's even more feel badsy than before. So loot's loot. Yeah, outside the legendary, of course, that will be less common.
Okay.
And
gotcha.
Yeah, to second that question, Chromie asked a related question. No, we won't have a DFT situation. That was actually a loot table issue on how the table was written, not an intentional choice. So
Gordon Ramsay here, I'll kind of mix his question up a little bit. He was asking about DH being too OP, again, like 1.0. Will custom classes, is there a worry about them being too overpowered compared to like 1.0 to 2.0? Like, do you have to have them in raid no matter what? Or is it like every other class where they just bring their own little spice of life?
Everybody's broken.
Yeah, so I think the best way to answer that is it's very hard to balance a custom class against base 335 classes because they all sucked. You can love them, but in retrospect, they were awful. Yeah. All of the classes and specs in Duskhaven 2.0 are completely custom. So we're not worried about any class being too OP. We also have I think he just joined chat, somebody that's just hyper fixated on raid synergies. So what I will tell you is that I have a thing that's come up a lot, and I explain it like this. Required versus optimal. So required is you can't feasibly do the content without it. Mm-hmm. Optimal is it will make your raid the strongest it can be. Both of those they sound the same, but they're different. An optimal raid, though, will have a little bit of everybody. every class has things that it brings to the table that no other class or few other classes bring. So
Gotcha.
typically what's kind of been happening is, let's say that Bard has a buff. Well, maybe Frost Mage also brings that buff. And that's not a real example. I'm just pulling out of my ass. And then Marksman Hunter also has that specific buff. So see what that does is the class brings it, and certain specs have their own buffs that they bring. So you can, oh, well, we don't have a Bard this week. Oh, well, that's fine. I'll switch from Fire to Frost for this week or whatever.
Heresy.
Cool.
Yeah. So there's going to be there's going to be quite a bit of overlap. I think every single raid synergy buff and debuff has 3 sources minimum. There won't be any class that is mandatory, but it'll be optimal to have one of everything in your raid comp.
Next question from Bellcross. Are there any plans to add another role type to the game in addition to the RPG Trinity? I guess kind of like support how we had with Bard for a little bit.
Yes, but it won't be its own role like how Augmentation Evoker is. There will be some classes like Bard and some specs that will be more group focused than others, but they aren't paying for it. So I very strongly went against, when we first designed Bard, it was like, oh, they need to do half the damage of a normal DPS because they bring all these buffs. And I said, no, because Paladin also brings, resist aura and kings and might and wisdom, and like all of these classes can bring very supportive things, but we're not planning anything on the scale of Augmentation Evoker. The door is open for that in the future, but it's not planned at the current moment.
Also, from a design standpoint, adding a new role like that is extremely difficult due to the MMO Trinity problem. And I mean, tank, DPS, heal has been the Trinity of WoW since forever. It's one of the few design concepts that they've never really challenged. They tried, like when they did damaging healers and then vengeance for tanks in Kata. Like they very much tried hybrid things, and they quickly learned that there are good reasons why you don't do that.
All right, so next question. This is from Cletus. He's saying, so if Legos are rarer in their tier, won't be BIS in later tiers, will drop rate be increased in later tiers? So
Yes.
I assume he means drop rates from previous tiers. It goes up as time goes on.
Yeah, so if you don't get a Trash Bringer and you really want to be a Trash Bringer carrier, once tier 2 comes out, the drop rate will go up substantially.
All right, so a question for Sturges here.
Shit.
From Bellcross. Will stuff like Nightfall be nerfed from outset, or the armor debuff procs from like Bashgooder and things like that? Will items that we can bring from dungeons or recipes that debuff enemies or buff us, will they be nerfed, or do we have any plans for those kind of things?
Honestly, it's a really soft touch thing that we have to do, especially with Nightfall, just because it's always been in that trap of either too good or just crap. So it's something very much having to play with ear. I believe during our initial itemization notes, we had opted to not touch as much crafted stuff, and as a result, definitely on some of those power things, we kind of haven't changed them from the original Waddle K. That to be said, my master plan was to move a lot of that stuff, in particular towards more trinket stuff down the line, because it's a lot easier for us to personally touch and kind of maneuver.
That is also where you expect those effects to be as a player. For them being on a weapon,
And
that also means that you really can't replace your weapon, which is problematic because you might feel like it's more powerful than it is, when weapon damage is definitely going to be your most powerful stat as a melee, for example.
Supper is here. He's asking, am I allowed to ask the raid design philosophy or mechanics? I still get nightmares about Tomb of Sigaris. We all do. Tomb of Sigaris was rough.
Yeah, so I will say this. Soak mechanics are garbage. Also, you won't see overlapping spells. I'm scripting them out to force delays. So basically, no 2 mechanics can happen within like a 5-second buffer of each other. So that's something that's incredibly easy to add, but if you don't do your math right, you will fuck it up. So I did a lot of math on that. Raid mechanics in general, here's how I look at it. If you step into normal and you clear the raid, I use this as an example. So Baron Geddon, right? He has the firebomb, the living bomb that he puts on a raid member, right? Everybody's familiar with that. So on normal, that's just going to be a bomb that you get out of the group, it falls off, yay. The heroic version very likely would be something along the lines of has to get out of the group and be dispelled. Once they're out of range, you'd throw a dispel on them, and that makes it more interactive. Somebody has to have their eyes open that isn't just the person getting the debuff. And then on Mythic, it would be something where once it's dispelled, it leaves a permanent flame patch for the rest of the fight. So area denial, I think, is one of the most rewarding mechanics because it gives you this enrage timer without a hard enrage. So if you're really clever, you could squeeze a little bit more time out of the boss. So area denial is one of my favorite mechanics. As far as it goes, I don't want to throw just a bunch of new mechanics. So there are very few new mechanics on Heroic and Mythic. Usually it's a scaling up. For instance, one of the bosses in Scarlet Rebellion, which I don't mind sharing because once PTR hits, you'll be testing it anyway, is the Houndmaster. On normal, once you hit the final phase, he starts using multi-shot. Well, on Heroic, he gets multi-shot throughout the entire fight. On Mythic, he adds explosive shot to his multi-shot timing, right? So it's kind of that where the mechanics build up rather than just slap new ones on the thing. The design philosophy changes to make the raid more difficult by you learning it on the easier difficulty, and then it gets harder, or you have to approach it a slightly different way. But not just, oh, well, let's go in here, and what's that new spell he's casting? No idea, boss. Right? Like, and I don't want, 50 mechanics going on at the same time. I think retails by force had to go a little too far in that direction for like Race to World First, because those guys are absolutely mind-bogglingly better at the game than anybody else in this room will ever be. I never want somebody to die in a raid and not know why. And no, to answer the other question, we're never going to do, white debuff on marble floor with, the lights on. We're going to have clearly delineated telegraphing. So whether that's a giant different colored circle surrounding the mechanic, or the mechanic is just a different color, right? Because like Molten Core, it's fire on fire, but there are ways to make that very visible, where you have just like a very bright red circle around the fire patch, or you have ash at the edge of it to where it has this black border. There are a lot of things like that you can do. But yeah, I don't want the green on teal on blue, like nonsense.
Alrighty. Well, once again, thank y'all so much for coming in here and answering our questions. That's been awesome.